right, guys, welcome to Men's Alliance Podcast. Today we've got with us David Murrow. David, welcome to the Men's Alliance Podcast, brother.
I'm glad to be with you and glad to tell you why men hate going to church.
Man, so David Murrow is the author of the book titled Why Men Hate Going to Church, amongst other books, but this is the book that brought him onto our radar. I know that Eagle read it and then reread it when there was an updated edition,
hmm
marked it up, highlighted it up, tabbed it up, and was like, Goose, you have to read this book. I read it, totally blown away, despite the fact that I thought, just based on the title, I thought I knew everything you were going to say. Just based on the title, I was like, I'm with him. I already get it. But I read the book, learned so much. You've got so much great material in there. I feel like you could be as the patron saint of Men's Alliance if that were a thing. But
Yeah.
tell us, why do men hate going to church?
Well, when I wrote the book 20 years ago, we had a completely different culture. Church was more feminized than culture was.
Hmm.
Think about the things we encourage men to do: get highly emotional, hold hands, cry, be in relationships, sing love songs to another man. A lot of the things we do in church just kind of had that scent, that feeling of femininity. And so, I mean, you think about some guys who are on a construction site. These are three construction workers, and it's a Wednesday night. They're talking about what they're going to do after work, and the first guy says, "Well, I'm just going to get down to the bar and have a beer." And the second guy says, "Well, I got tickets to a baseball game." The third guy says, "Well, I'm going to Wednesday night services at my church." Now, you see, the other two guys are like, "What?"
Hmm.
It's like we're doing, going to a bar, going to a game, those are guy things. Going to church, that's a woman's thing. And that's been the perception for years. Now, something interesting is happening in the church, though, right now. The culture has become so feminized, it has moved so far to the feminine side that church is now actually more masculine than culture. You think about, woke culture, it's all about caring and nurturing, and the right way to be is to be all sensitive. And that's true to a point. We do need to be caring, we do need to be nurturing. But woke culture took it so far in the feminine direction that church is actually now more masculine than the culture. And we're seeing a corresponding return of men to church, men who are looking, the church didn't move, the culture did. And so we're seeing a return of men who are looking for rules, they're looking for order, they're looking for a refuge from kind of this performative empathy that's gone on in the culture. Allie Beth Stuckey just wrote a book called Toxic Empathy. I don't know if you've seen it, but it
No,
definitely,
I love the title though.
yeah, no, it talks about how in the culture they've taken empathy so far to an unhealthy direction that church is actually masculine by comparison. And so I think this is probably one of the main reasons we're seeing men coming back to church is because they're looking for a refuge from all this performative compassion that we're seeing in the culture that is actually injurious to men and it's harming society.
Man, so what year was your book
Why
first
men?
published?
Why Men came out in 2005. So as we're
2005.
recording this, we're 20 years down the road.
Yeah. And so, I'm also thinking, yeah, not only was church at that time, church was more feminine than society as a whole, it was more empathetic than society as a whole. And now those things have kind of switched. And I'm sure there's other things that fall into that category as well that have switched over these years to
Mhm.
where the rest of America is so feminine, so confused, so soft, so comfortable, all these things we could say that by comparison, church has changed less. So it's looking better. So I understand you're working on a new book.
Yes, I don't have a contract yet, but I'm hoping to write a book called Why Men Love Going to Church. And we're going to dive into this gender split, and I'm going to even touch the third rail. I'm going to talk about the gender split in politics as well. I mean, we're definitely seeing the Democratic Party has gone all in on empathy, and the Republican Party has all gone all in on dominance. And
Hmm.
so we're actually, and neither one is good in too much excess. I mean, if you look at Christ, he was all empathy and he was all righteousness. He was all
Yeah.
grace and he was all law. And if we're going to be men of God, we can't be drawn too far to either extreme,
Yeah.
uh, because Jesus wasn't.
Right.
Who were the Pharisees? They were all about law. Back in those days, nobody was all about empathy because everybody was under Roman occupation. But yeah, so I'm going to go into that, the male and female split that's gone on, the toxic extremes that social media is pulling us toward, and how we have to resist that. But I'm also going to be talking to some pastors and some ministers and some men's guys, like perhaps Men's Alliance,
Mm.
who are doing. I'm seeing a lot of fruit in the parachurch, and
Yeah.
I'm going to be helping churches see that we've got to start taking instruction from what we're seeing in the parachurch organizations. That the first wave of this was Promise Keepers. We saw a huge return of men to church, getting together in big, stadiums. There was a lot of foment from that. And then Promise Keepers in, the late 90s just went off a cliff. And now what I'm seeing now in the men's movement is kind of a second wave where parachurch organizations such as yours are doing really good work with men by focusing on men's issues and by pulling men away from either extreme, pulling them back to following Christ first before any political agenda or any social agenda.
Yeah. You know, that this brings up such a great point about we talk in Men's Alliance about biblical masculinity and what does that look like, and specifically we use the phrase reforging biblical masculinity. And what I've learned, what I've seen as we've started using that wording more, is people genuinely don't know what you're talking about. What is biblical masculinity? Like, well, what do you mean by biblical masculinity? What is that? We are not in a culture anymore that even knows what that means, which is kind of it can be a good thing because it gives us a chance to start with a clean slate and explain it from scratch. Um, People have no idea what it is, so they're not bringing in a lot of excess baggage like they probably would have if we were using this phrase 20, 25 years ago. But it's also sad because our country doesn't know what biblical masculinity is. And when you say that, they just have some sort of ideas and pictures in their head of some sort of toxicity, some sort of a bodybuilder who's a bully, I think is
Yeah.
kind of, and as you start talking to people and you're like, no, the biblical masculinity is about protecting, providing, loving, leading. It creates this great conversation for us to have because we're introducing something to a world that this is completely foreign to.
Right. And I do think it's kind of frightening. And I am very concerned about the public persona of a lot of Christian men right now who seem to be drawn to more of the extreme toward legalism, toward shouting others down.
Right.
We saw the left, the crazy whacked out left trying, doing the shouting down and shutting things down. And somehow we thought that was a good idea too. So we have to recognize that the Christian faith, at its heart, is all about caring, kindness, compassion, these things, and we cannot allow others to define what those words mean for us. We need to exercise these what you would call more feminine gifts the way Jesus did. And that's not to be drawn to this crazy extreme where compassion means pumping children full of hormones or turning them into amputees. That is not compassion. But we do have to realize that there is a healthy kind of compassion, a healthy level of caring that has to be the foundation of our faith. And then once Christ has, basically pulverized our heart and softened us, then he calls us to a second journey, which we call the journey of strength. I don't know if you've ever read my third book, The Map.
No.
Okay, let's go on a little 2-minute journey here.
Great.
And if you have the capability, I'm going to have you pop up a screen right now. I'm going
Okay.
to show your viewers a
We've
diagram.
got we've got the guy.
Okay, so this is the biblical map to manhood. And what it's men, some men start down here in the corner in what I call the macho foothills. This is a performative masculinity. You're always right. You prove your manhood by what you own, who you dominate, how much you can drink, how much you fight, who you can sleep with, etc. This is an unhealthy form of masculinity. It's a small representation, a fake version of the real mountain of manhood. Now, when Christ calls us, the first part of our journey of faith is to go in the feminine direction. Think about it. The first things we have to do is we have to weep over our sin. We have to put away our macho pretensions. We have to stop, defining ourselves by sinning, or by harming others. And if you look at the first 7 chapters of Matthew, Jesus is completely lamb. The first 7 chapters of his life, as described in the Gospel of Matthew, I call it the journey of submission. Everything about he's born as a helpless baby, he flees for his life. He's baptized in the Jordan, and his father says, "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." And then he preaches a message whose great themes are blessed are the meek, turn the other cheek, do not resist an evil person. If you stop at Matthew 7, you get a very
Mm,
feminized Jesus.
yeah.
But then in Matthew 8 through 25, he turns the other direction and moves completely in the lion direction. And this is where the manly Jesus comes out. The Jesus who overturns tables, who rebukes the Pharisees, who raises the dead, who commands the forces of nature. And so I take this as our second act of our faith. Once Christ has pulverized our heart and softened our heart, we need to move from a journey of submission into a journey of strength. And one of the most dangerous things is a guy who skips the first journey and goes straight to strength. I don't know if you've ever heard of this guy, Mark Driscoll.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. A guy who skipped the journey of submission and went straight to strength. And he harmed a lot of people along the way. And he's been hopefully been humbled by that. But and I hate to name names. I was a big Driscoll fan until he blew his church up. But anyway, second journey of strength. You move in the masculine direction, just as Jesus did. And then if you look at the last act of Jesus's life, he moves back in that kind of feminine, soft direction. Matthew 26 through 28, he serves his disciples a meal. He washes their feet. He's falsely accused and says nothing to defend himself. He's beaten, stripped, whipped, crucified. He becomes the sacrificial Lamb of God. And I call that the journey of sacrifice. So these are the 3 journeys of Jesus, the 3 journeys every man needs to follow. The journey of submission first, the journey of strength second, and the journey of sacrifice third. And you see this pattern not only in the life of Jesus, but in every great man of Scripture. The men who submitted to God, got their strength from God, and then sacrificed for God, all became the greatest heroes. But those men who skipped a journey or got them in the wrong order were destroyed. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
teach men, whenever I do a men's retreat, I teach the 3 journeys of Jesus. This crazy church I'm planning to plant in Phoenix, Arizona, all the men are going to go through the 3 journeys of Jesus. That's going to be our forge. That's going to be our framework for forge. You got to be softened first, strengthened second, and then you got to sacrifice in the end.
Man, that is so good. Yeah, that'll preach right there. We could talk for hours about those 3 things for sure. I think you've nailed it there, and picturing that pendulum. That's just a great visual for how we start life in infancy and how we grow into through adolescence to adulthood, and then how we end our lives. Literally setting the example in how to die well, right?
Yes.
We talk in Men's Alliance about everything we're doing. We're leading by example for our families, and that goes all the way to death.
Hmm.
Um, ideally, we would be the first to die in our families. Um, nobody want. We're not supposed to bury our kids. That's a tragedy. We're hoping to go first, and our kids bury us, and in so doing, set that example. And that's what I'm hearing you kind of highlight there. Is that's how Jesus did it, and that's that sacrifice stage at the end. We all end our lives by showing and setting the examples of how to die well, how to sacrifice ourselves as well. So That's fantastic. I wanted to ask you, one of my favorite parts of your book, Why Men,
Hmm.
is this realization that there are some organizations in this country that are really good at reaching men,
Hmm.
and they use um, a challenge. The word challenge is all over the place,
Hmm.
and that is something that has been noticeably missing from the church's strategy to reaching men with virtually no challenge. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to challenge, we talk a good game, but we don't model that with our bodies or with our activities in church.
Hmm.
Let's talk about what actually happens in church. Okay.
Let's.
All right. So you come in or you drop your kids off, then you find a place in a chair that are seated in rows. You stand while the band plays. You sit while the pastor speaks. Now, then you go pick up your kids and you go home. So what did you do with your body? What did you model while you were in church? You were an audience. We didn't build an audience. Oh, we didn't build an army. We built an audience. We trained you. The church trains guys to be audiences. Now, there's nothing
Mm.
wrong with being an audience. There's nothing wrong with singing to God. There's nothing wrong with hearing the word preached. But what the men who are really good, or the people who are really good at church, are those who are good at being an audience. Those who can sit quietly, those who are studious, those who can take notes, those who can attend a Bible study, look up passages in books. The challenge element is really not there in most church things. Now, I know this crazy guy in Virginia who started a ministry by challenging guys to lift tires and
Yeah.
do
What the heck
calisthenics.
is he doing?
No, he's a complete innovator. It's like, but because what he did is instead of gathering men as an audience, he started building an army. Now, and so I think this is going to be the key to going forward. As much as we love the church format of gathering in an auditorium and watching a guy preach and watching a band play, as familiar as that is, I don't think that really ignites much in the hearts of men. We've got to, if guys are going to make the effort to gather for church, I think we've got to do church differently. We need to do different things than audiencing.
Yeah, like you said, it's a very familiar model. It's a very comfortable model, and we need to realize here in this conversation that it's there's nothing sacred about that model, right? You can do church all different kinds of ways.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Let me stop you there. Okay.
do it.
Do you know why church is the way it is?
Tell me.
500 years ago, a German monk named Martin Luther had a problem. He had to teach the gospel to an audience that was largely illiterate, information starved, and isolated. Okay? These people couldn't read. Books were expensive, so even if you gave them a book, they couldn't read it. So you needed a guy who could read to stand on a stage and turn the words of the scriptures into verbal words so that they could be taught. And so we still do this 500 years later. We still act as if our audience is illiterate,
Mm.
information starved. Are you information starved anymore?
Oh my gosh, we're the opposite.
No, we're information overloaded.
Yeah.
Okay. But we still cling to this old model because it's familiar to us. And here's the insider tip. We don't even have to remember it or put it into action. It's, I can hear a sermon that makes me feel good. It gives me the feels, but I don't have to do anything about it. Think about it. I leave church with absolutely no plan to help me implement what I just learned. There's no scripture readings like daily devotions based on the theme of the sermon. There's no team around me to help me live it out. There are no daily devotions I can share with my kids. There are no witnessing tools. There are no memes or teasers that I can put online. Nothing. It's come listen to me talk for 40 minutes. See you next week and bring a friend. If we were really serious about disciple making, we would be equipping people every single day. And I'm actually I'm looking for a church that wants to help me try this plan. I've got this plan on my YouTube page. I call it Gold Nugget Preaching. But what it is you preach on Sunday, but then you equip people all week long in teams to live it out. And I think that's going to be the mod. Everybody's looking for the new model of church.
Mm,
And there's some really cool stuff going on, like with home churches and dinner
yep.
churches and missional churches. And great, these are fantastic. But I really think the model that's going to uh, what am I trying to say? Not replace what we have, but enhance what we have is going to be a model where we shorten the Sunday sermon, but then we equip people every single day in teams. They're meeting online in teams, and you equip them every single day to reach their kids, to reach their neighbors, diving them deeper into scripture, just giving them all these resources. And this is actually what I'm trying to do with this new church called the League that I'm hoping to plant very soon. Is we don't just preach on Sunday and say, see you next week. We equip you all week long in teams to reach your family, to reach your your community. I mean, we're just going to baptize you in the subject, and we're all going to work on the same subject all week long.
Yeah, this model where you talk about you come in and you're an audience member for an hour and you leave. The problem that I personally felt so much tension around in my life, not really tension, but more of like a hunger, was I felt totally isolated inside of that model. Um, Probably more isolated at a larger church.
Oh yeah.
I was at a church of about 200, 300, and I didn't feel that isolated there because you can't sneak in and out there. They're gonna know your name. But then the larger the church, a man can just go sit there, be an audience member, leave, come back next week. He can do that every week for 2 decades and not know anybody there and not have anybody there that knows him.
Right.
And so, for me, it was like, I know that what I need in my life is I need strong Christian men who I can count on, who know my struggles and who know me inside and out and who are going to be there for me. And that was the thing that I saw missing from the model. And I think churches knew that was missing and they tried to do things to fix it. But at least from my perspective, these things didn't work for me. Now, they might have worked for some people, but they would, the church would do things like a breakfast or a men's night. And I'm like, man, this is a really nice try. They obviously put a lot of time and effort into this. And it would be kind of the same thing again. It would be the same thing, but with food, right? I'm still an audience member. I'm still an
Yeah.
audience member, but now I got some good food. But the problem that we found, and we jokingly say in Men's Alliance, men don't bond over coffee cake, but that's really the root of that is like, you're not going to bond. You're not going to develop a band of brothers at a church breakfast or at a men's night. It's like, that's just not how men bond. And that's what we need in order to have that band of brothers that's going through life with us. And even the church small group model, if I can touch on that one for a second, of going into somebody's living room and sitting there and discussing a chapter of a book and having some refreshments together. Once again, great try, not how we bond. And what I found, because I've been in lots of these groups in different churches, different states, couples ones, men's ones, all these different small groups I've been in, I've seen it work really well for my wife. She'll develop great female friendships and not so much with the guys. The one small group I will say that I was in where I made tremendous male friends was in Georgia. And the only reason why we bonded was because we all started getting together outside of the small group to train together for a triathlon.
There it is.
And so,
There it is.
so we started in this small group together, but then what happened was we were getting together every Saturday to either swim, bike, or run. And so it turned into that. But just this whole idea of the model doesn't work for men. Men have to bond in small groups, and it has to be some sort of a shared physical struggle. And as your book got me thinking about this, This was one of like those light bulb moments from your book, was realizing that um, the challenge part, the make it harder, not easier, was actually the way Jesus did it. And that was my light bulb moment from your book, is when people came to Jesus, and you give this example of a guy coming to a pastor, I think in a church in Alaska, and saying, "I want to become a Christian."
Oh yeah.
Tell us about that and how that is the Jesus model.
Yeah, this is a story. It's actually a couple of guys I know. This high achieving bush pilot, man's man, uh, uh, survived multiple near death experiences, hunter, just had multiple affairs with women. And he came to a point of repentance. And he went up front. I'm watching this. He goes up front after the service and he goes to this pastor who he's known for quite a while. They were sinning buddies back in the old days. The pastor
Mm.
is a Christian now. And he says, "Look, I'm messing up my life. I think I need Jesus." The pastor looks at him and says, "Stop wasting my time. When you're ready to give everything to God, come back and see me. Now get out of here." Now, I've never heard an altar call like that. But this pastor knew this man and knew what a high achiever he was, and the amount of testosterone flowing through this guy's. I mean, he'd built this hunting lodge. I mean, he's just like Mr. Do It, right? But he knew what he was dealing with. And so instead of saying, "Well, you need to come home to Jesus, you just need to repent of your sins," he says, "Stop wasting my time. Get out of here." Now, I would not recommend this as a broad evangelism strategy.
And I'll
Okay.
pause you here. I
Yeah.
guarantee you, men listening to this, especially anyone in ministry listening to this, is cringing right now, thinking, "What on earth are you doing? You've messed this up. You've
Oh
fumbled."
yeah,
Right?
this is a guy with a hunting lodge. I mean, think of all the retreats we could have there. I mean,
Right.
it's almost like when the rich young ruler came to Jesus,
Well, that's exactly what I'm thinking
and
of.
the disciples are just adding it up. They're thinking, "Man, this dude could finance us. We don't have to run around being hungry anymore. We don't have to scrimp for donations or rely on a coin here or two to make our daily bread. This guy could fund us out of the back of his pocket." And what does Jesus do? He sends the man away. It's like,
Yeah. And that's what the light bulb moment was, is like Jesus challenged men, yet today's churches are not picking up on that page from his playbook. Right? It's like Jesus challenged men. He said things like, "Oh yeah, go sell everything you own and give it to the poor," or let your
let the dead bury
let
their
the
own
dead
dead.
bury their dead. Yeah, and no pastor today would ever talk like that to a man. But aren't we supposed to try to be like Jesus? And it's like, and I get that, like, culturally we're so far from that to even hear me say that, you're probably like, "Well, not like that, Dave, not that much like him," right? But it's like, no, it is that much like him, and we're doing it so wrong, it's so backwards. uh, that pastor in Alaska who says, "Don't waste my time," that pastor is doing it the right way. Because what happened? What did the bush pilot say?
So a couple weeks later, he came back. He was a crying mess. He had reconciled with his wife. He'd admitted the affairs. He had stopped drinking, and now he's a faithful follower of Jesus. Um, he
Unbelievable.
he was toying with the faith. He was doing the right thing. He knew his life was a mess, but this pastor knew that there was that this guy needed a bracing call to discipleship, just as Jesus did. And I think we can use these judiciously. Again, I probably wouldn't issue such a call in a mixed gender setting. I probably wouldn't issue such a call even from the pulpit. But if you know the individual involved,
Right.
as Jesus probably did, he probably knew the rich young ruler. Since he was a ruler, he was known to the culture. Then I think he felt comfortable issuing that challenge. And it says the rich young ruler went away sad because he had great wealth. It doesn't say whether he eventually came to be a follower of Jesus. I would imagine he did, if his story is told in the scriptures, but it's not clear. So to your point, I think challenge judiciously used in individual with individuals, especially in small group settings, I think can be a very strong magnet to men.
Mhm.
I've made little mention to this church plant I'm hoping to do called the League.
Yeah.
If I can get into that a little bit now,
Yeah, do it.
that this is going to be a high challenge church. We're going to have a limited number of places in the church. There's going to be 6 teams. Each team is going to have 2 team captains, and you're going to have to apply. You're going to have to apply to be a part of this church.
Hmm.
And you're making a daily commitment to doing the daily playbook, which we send. You're going to be in the scriptures every day. You're checking in with your teammates online, no matter where you are, no matter how busy you are. You're at least going to say hello. How can I pray for you? We're going to foster relationships every day. And it's going to start with men. We're going to have every person's going to have 2 team captains and a coach that looks after them, that checks on them every day. Um, and that may sound kind of
Wow.
creepy. It sounds kind of creepy to you, but if you read Acts chapter 2, it says the early church met daily in the temple courts. And by a check, I just mean, how are you doing? How can I pray for you?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not in your business every day, but what we want to do is foster connection. I mean, this is really, I'm in a really tough part of my life right now. Let me just get really real with you.
Please.
I live in Alaska. I have a second residence in Arizona. I'm currently working in Pennsylvania. So I'm here, there, and I speak. I'm traveling all the time. So it's very, very difficult for me to say, well, go to church on Sunday and then go to a small group on Thursday night because I'm here, there, and everywhere all the time. So if I had a way to, if I had a couple of guys that were checking in with me online every day, and we were reading the same scriptures, and we were having a discussion about it, and I was being equipped to, talk to my kids and or my grandkids now. But if I had these resources at my fingertips, great podcasts, constantly, just things that really would build my faith, my faith would explode if I had a couple of coaches that were looking after me. But this doesn't exist. It doesn't exist yet. And so this is why God is talking to me about starting this, a church based not on preaching, praise, and programs, but based on community and coaching.
Mm.
And I think the personal coaching aspect is where the churches would like to do more coaching, but we're not built to do that because preaching, praise, and programs are what we do. That's
Mm.
where 90% of our attention and energy go. And preaching, praise, and programs are great things. I would never want to diminish those. But in today's age, where we're no longer information starved, but we're more isolated than ever, we need to be coaching people. We need to build daily relationships, especially with guys, because we'll just kind of go off and do our own thing. Hey, I'm busy at work. I'll see you next week. And so my heart is really hungry for that type of daily coaching regime. And I want to build that because I know there are men out there who are tired of just going to church, hearing the sermon, and then nothing during the week. I don't want to inspire you on Sunday and then leave you alone. Instead, I want to introduce a concept on Sunday, and then I want to train you all week how to live it out and how to share it with others.
Man, I love that idea. I'm excited to see this take off. I think it's exactly what our country needs more of. And this idea, going back to this pastor in Alaska talking to the bush pilot,
Yeah,
this really reminds me of a story about some military recruiters that went to a local high school.
yeah.
And they all got up and they gave their sales pitch for why their branch of service, and you should come check them out. And this Marine recruiter got up there and just looked over the audience and didn't say a word, and just scans the place. And then he says, "I only see about 2 or 3 of you that in this entire auditorium that could make it in the Marine Corps. You probably know who you are. Just come talk to me at the break." And of course, he was swamped. He had everybody there talking to him. But I think that just goes to show that men want to be challenged.
Oh, oh,
We
oh,
want
oh. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna put a cherry on top of that for you. Okay.
great.
One of my favorite passages of scripture is it's in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus prays all night, and then he calls together all of his disciples, and from among them chooses 12, whom he designates apostles. Now, think about that. He chose 12. He didn't choose however many. And I
But
think
isn't that exclusive?
that here's the thing: when we do not choose men, we injure them. Men want to be chosen. Now, later on, Jesus sends 72 out to minister. Where did they come from? I'll bet you a good number of those were the men who stayed his disciples even though they were not chosen. He used that as a sifting method to find out who was really with him
Yeah.
and who wasn't. I can't say it for sure because I didn't write the Bible and I wasn't there, but I could pretty much guarantee you most of the 72 were the ones who were not chosen. And so I think we've got to, at some point, say to men, I choose you to be a part of this Delta force, this elite force. And those of you who I did not choose today, you are on probation. I want you to continue to fight your way in to this force. There will,
Mhm.
if you prove yourself faithful, there will be a place for you. And this is the way we're doing the league. I mean, we've got room for 16 coaches and captains, and then we're full. But I want those who didn't make it on the first time to prove that they do want to make it by staying faithful instead of going off and sulking in the corner.
Being asked to prove that you want it is just something so foreign to the American church. Like the bar is
Completely.
lowered. The bar is lowered constantly. We're just kept more and more comfortable, and it's just everything's inclusive. Everything's an all play. And I find that men generally get bored with that and just go sit on the sideline. Would rather do something different. But when you say this is going to be hard, I don't know if you can handle it. I'm not even sure if you're up for it. This is going to be the greatest challenge of your life. Now it's like I'm leaning forward in my seat. Now I'm all ears. And now I'm thinking this is something I want to go for. And it's just this simple psychological method that Jesus used and most churches don't. And that's the difference between reaching men and not reaching men. You said if we don't target men, we injure them. And this is 1,000% what's been going on. I feel like when churches, when they really target youth, they're kind of sidestepping the man, the dad, the husband. You actually, and this is gonna shock people because this is not the model, but you really shouldn't, in my opinion, as a church, target the youth. Because my kids are my responsibility. I don't want you to target my kids. I want you to help me reach my kids. I want you to equip me, train me, encourage me so that I can go home and reach my kids. But if you just go around me and you're training my kids and you're reaching my kids, well, I guess I'll just have a seat on the sideline because I'm obviously irrelevant and replaceable. And so churches need to scale back, in Dave Mills' opinion, scale back all the stuff you're doing for women and children because that's the man's responsibility. Instead, train the husband and father how to reach his wife and children. And then we're engaged, and then we're kind of like putting the model back in the order it's supposed to be in.
Okay, so thank you for saying that because this is going to be one of the core principles of the league. Okay, I already told you there's no sermon, there's no praise band, there's no programs of any kind. So we don't have a youth ministry, we don't have a children's ministry. Instead, every day when you open your playbook, it comes to you electronically, there are exercises that you can do with your kids. And some of them are as simple as a scripture reading, some of them are object lessons, but every day, you and your family are working on, if it's forgiveness, all week long, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I am equipping you as a father to reach your kids for Christ because I'm not going to provide you with a youth ministry or children's ministry. Now, please, I'm not trying to trash youth ministry or children's ministry. I'm not saying that they are
Right.
completely ineffective. But what you and I are both pointing to, and the studies have shown, that a good youth ministry is not the key to winning people to Christ, winning young people to Christ. Children follow what their fathers do. Children follow their fathers in faith. And if we are not equipping the fathers and not expecting anything of them, if we're just, dropping a little bit of gospel on them on Sunday and see you next week, we're missing the greatest evangelism opportunity in history. So again, I'm glad you brought that up because in the league, we are going to equip parents to reach their own children, specifically dads, but also moms. And by giving them these tools they can use to start spiritual conversations. I never had these tools when my kids were little, and a lot of them struggle in faith as a result. Thank God they've come back, but it was a struggle because they I did not have a way, an easy way, an easily accessible way of discipling my kids. That was taken care of by the professionals at the church. And it didn't stick. And we've got all these deconstructors right now because of what their youth leaders told them or implied. And I think we just have to bring it back into the house. You with me on that one?
Oh, yeah. Amen. Has money gotten in the way of how God can use you? Let me tell you about Tom Love, certified financial planner with the Main Street Group. Tom Love from Tuckahoe Tribe, a.k.a. Doc, can absolutely get you squared away with your finances. My wife and I use Doc to handle our personal finances, and his team is second to none. Tom is a certified financial planner. He's a Dave Ramsey SmartVestor Pro. He's been ranked top 40 under 40. He's been ranked number 2 in Richmond Times-Dispatch. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal. And make sure you mention Men's Alliance whenever you reach out to Doc. He gives Men's Alliance, Tip of the Spear Ministries, a portion of the proceeds when you invest through him. He's a fee-only fiduciary, which means he doesn't make money unless you make money. So check out Tom Love at the Main Street Group. So, David, one of the other topics that you've covered, it's on your website, and I know we've got that in front of us for our listeners. It's davidmurrow.com, and that's MURROW, davidmurrow.com. This is just another one of those differences we see between the way local churches do things and the way Jesus did things very, very differently. And by the way, the Jesus way is also the masculine way that appeals to male psychology even in 2025. That hasn't changed. Talk to us about this idea on how church new member classes set people up, especially men, up for failure.
Okay, well, first of all, you go to the new members class and they promise nonstop awesome. You can be
awesome. That's the way that's the way you say it on your website, and I love that.
Yeah. So
if you promise anybody nonstop awesome, you're about to disappoint them.
Yeah, yeah. It's the old Lego movie. Everything is awesome.
Yep.
That's we kind of do a Lego movie type pitch. So what we do is, hi, I want to welcome, I'm Dave, your facilitator here, and I want to welcome you to our new members class. And I just want to tell you all the way God is blessing our church. And here are ways you can get in on what God is doing in our midst. So you can join a small group, or you could go on a mission trip, and you could get your children into our children's ministry. And you can enroll your youth in our youth ministry. And they're going to meet godly kids who are going to help them in their faith. And then you can get into a small group that meets for prayer, for support. And then you can, and we just go on and on and on, and we just promise all these great things. And you know what? It never lives up to the hype. Your kid gets into youth group and he's bullied. You go into a small group and there's like a couple about to have a divorce and they fight in the middle, or the group only meets once a month because one of their kids is always sick, or they're going off to baseball practice, or church life never lives up to the hype. It never lives up to the expectation.
Why on earth are we saying that everything's going to be exciting and everything's going to be amazing and everything's going to be awesome? That's not what Jesus ever said. In fact, he said the exact opposite.
Yeah, he said, if in Matthew, read Matthew chapter 10 sometime. I mean, it reads like a chamber of horrors. This is what you can expect: persecution, betrayal, flogging, death. No gourmet coffee promised when Jesus was calling his disciples, when he was sending out the 72.
I'm out right there.
Oh yeah. No gourmet coffee. Okay. I'm not saying that we need to promise persecution, betrayal, and death, but I think we need to get real.
Yeah, but even if you did that, you'd actually be closer to the Jesus model.
Yeah, I mean, could we at least tell them the truth about small groups? Somebody in your group is going to say something weird, or the person next to you is going to hold hands with you and he's going to be clammy and have body odor. You're going to go on a mission trip and you might get shot at. Your kids are going to have a terrible time at youth group sometime and they're going to want to quit the church. Can we be real about what church life is? Church is a rock tumbler. You get thrown in there with these other rocks and you get your rough edges knocked off, but
Mm,
you come out polished. You come out a gem. And I think this is what we need to tell people is that church life is difficult. Following Jesus is difficult. And the longer you do this, the closer you're going to get to sacrificing yourself.
yeah.
Maybe in death even. I love when I was a young Christian, I had a youth leader who said something that has stuck with me for almost 50 years. He said, if you do Christianity properly lived will result in your death.
Hmm.
And all the boys were like, sign me up,
Yes.
sign me up.
Yeah. I did an old podcast years ago. I think it's episode 30 of Men's Alliance podcast. It's all about how I am going to disappoint you. Like I promise you, if you are with me in Men's Alliance long enough, I will disappoint you. And I had a guy, one of my buddies at Alpha Tribe, brought that up this past week, and so I did this week's newsletter article about that and how we should all be prepared to be disappointed by our pastor, by our wife, by our kids. I'm pretty sure I have even disappointed my dog. He looks quite judgingly at me when I don't run him or walk him. It's like everything breaks down. Everything will disappoint us. We should not be shocked at that, right? We should not be shocked, when people let us down because that's what humans do. So we got to go into every relationship knowing this relationship is going to be an opportunity for me to practice forgiveness
Yeah,
and for
that
me to
that
practice asking for forgiveness.
right. And there's the thing. If we go back to what we were talking about earlier, the very foundation of our faith is forgiveness. It's being emotionally available, sensitivity, caring, all those feminine characteristics that we men tend to underplay. This is the foundation. In my book, The Map, I liken it to the foundation of a building. When you walk into a house, do you think about the poured concrete foundation? No, you don't think about it, but it's there. It's holding up the rest of the house. And so if we are not caring, if we are not loving, if we are not tender-hearted, then our journey of strength, the house itself, will fall. So yes, we have to have that at the core of who we are, but it's not what people notice. When they walk into our house, they notice the strength, but the kindness and gentleness are the foundation that holds up the man of action, the man of God. You see what I'm saying?
Man, that is good. Um, when you and I talked last week or two ago,
Hmm.
you touched on this idea, this theme that I've been nonstop thinking about since our conversation about um, a female-led group or a female-driven church is more concerned with the who, and the men are more concerned with the what. Tell
Yeah.
tell our listeners about that.
Oh, okay. Here we go. Feminists, cover your ears. I'm just going to tell you the way it is. When you get a group of women together, the first question they will ask is who is included? Who gets a place at the table? And as I was talking about the feminization of society, this has been the obsession with identity politics. If we simply have the right people at the table, the right cast of characters in our presentation or whatever,
Yeah.
who is more important than what they can achieve, what we're here to do. And who is, and I'm not saying that who isn't important. You do need the right people. You do but with men, the primary concern is what? What are we here to accomplish? What are we here to do? Men will ask what first. So
What
these
is
are,
the point?
yeah, what's the point? Why are we here to do it? And so much in church, has no what? Why does this committee meet? Well, because we've always met. Why are we doing this? Because we've always done it. So
Hmm.
we're not answering the what question. Instead, it's the who. Let's get a large group of people, a big audience together to see this presentation, this chorale, this revival, this meeting or whatever. And as I said, who is important? You do want a full church. You do want lots of people there. I'm not saying that who isn't important.
Right.
But if your church becomes focused on who, and this is where these very progressive liberal churches, it's all about who. Do we have the LGBTQ community represented? Are we, it's all questions of who. And
It's
they
it's
and
so it's so who that they have no idea what the what even is. There is
they're
no what.
well, or you create a what that doesn't really exist in the Bible. The,
Mm,
the the social justice agenda that goes way beyond the
yeah.
justice that Jesus called for. Jesus is all about social justice. He's not about wheeling teenagers into operating rooms to have their bodies mangled by surgeons. We can follow our social justice way too far beyond anything Christ would have advocated.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. When you get too much into who, activists can get in there and they can completely take you away from, something that is the will of God. And it's the same on it's legalism on one side and liberalism on the other. And
Mhm.
they're both toxic and dangerous if you go too far to either extreme.
So let me ask you to give us the solution to this church, this why men problem. What can either, if there's a pastor listening to this, or there's just a man who wants to change his church culture, what can churches do to become more masculine and more attractive to men?
Okay. Well, in the book 20 years ago, I held up the mega churches. They were doing really well with men 20 years ago. If you wanted to find guys, younger, uh, let me just put it this way, guys with muscles,
Hmm.
more masculine guys, you went to a mega church.
Yeah.
If you went to an older traditional church, it was mainly the older guys and stuff.
Why
But
why is that? Why are the older churches only older guys without muscles?
it was the who. It was all about gathering. It was
Are
about
you
keeping
saying
tradition alive.
does that imply that the older churches were more feminine led?
They were, especially even if they didn't have women in formal leadership positions. Many of them did. The liberal mainline churches, they have what I call the grandmocracy,
Hmm.
church led by grandmas.
Oh yeah.
But
I've
then
seen that in action.
even in conservative churches, there's an informal grandmocracy. There might be men in the formal leadership positions, but the older women were really leading the church.
Right.
So it's the lace doily on the communion table, the Kleenexes on every pew. We sent all these signals to men that this is a
Did
grandma
Jesus
place.
did Jesus not have a lace doily on his
Uh,
table?
John chapter, no, I'm just kidding. Uh, no, I didn't see any doilies in the Gospels.
I don't think so.
I did see a whip once, but never a doily.
Yeah.
Uh, so, so yes, that these older traditional churches, they tend to lose their men, and the older women tend to provide hospice care to these dying institutions.
Mm.
So the dynamism was in the younger mega church, the contemporary church. You tended to have a more masculine type leader who was really good at articulating the what. And so these were the churches that tended to attract men. Guess what? Even the mega churches are starting to empty out now. And I think what I'm saying is the next step we need to take with men is, instead of putting all our energy into preaching, praise, and programs, putting on a great Sunday show, and then plugging people into activities, we've got to shift the focus to coaching. We need to raise up coaches, guys like Dave Goose Mills, who have a burning desire to see other men following Christ, and then build a coaching structure into the church.
Hmm.
And you close the door. You say, once we're full, we're full. And that's going to go against everything we've in the church, we've got the empty chair mentality. I'll pull up another chair. No, Don't pull up another chair. Close the frickin' door. And then, can I say frickin' on a Christian podcast? Okay.
We allow it.
Oh, thank you. Close the frickin' door, and then tell the guys who didn't get into the groups, stand by,
We've said a lot worse on this podcast.
stand by. And if they stand by, then you bring them in on the next wave, just like we've
Yeah.
said. But I would say if you're even with a large church, a contemporary church, you're seeing your numbers going down. You've got to organize your men, and you've got to teach them differently and then the other thing, of course, would be the gold nugget preaching. If any of you want to talk to me about that, I'll consult with you for free. I'm not going to charge anything. Just go to davidmurrow.com, send me a message, and I can show you how to train people every single day using digital tools, which is really the next step we've got to do. The church is losing the battle for attention because we gather people in a room once a week, we talk to them for 40 minutes, and then they go home and they're on TikTok, they're on YouTube, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. And who's winning, the church or Instagram?
Oh yeah, no question. It's not
Instagram.
It's not even close.
Yeah, because they're competing for attention and the church is not. We're still stuck in the Martin Luther mode. We talk to you once a week and we'll see you next week. So church has got to get serious about discipling people every day and putting people onto teams. And if I can toot my horn once again, go to davidmurrow.com/league to learn more about this church that I'm planning to plant, God willing, in late 2025, where we disciple people every day, we put people on teams, and I'm hoping that this becomes even maybe just a graduate program. Think about, you've got let's say you have a church of 2,000 people, you've got bored men in your church.
Yeah.
Who are tired of being an audience for preachers and musicians. Start a league as a church within a church. You got a building on Sunday night, we do the league on Sunday night. And we supercharge those disciples and we see what happens. So again, reach out to me at davidmurrow.com/league. You can read about it. And I'm gonna do whatever it takes to help you get this thing started.
I love it. I don't know if you want to drop a teaser for this one or not, but this concept that you were explaining to me about Jesus didn't speak very often for 40 minutes. Typically, he spoke in parables that took less than 2 minutes, and you're also doing some work there.
Yes, I am. Why am I in Pennsylvania? I'm currently working in a television studio here, working on a new video series for men. That every video series for men is based on a preaching model. A guy gets on camera and speaks to the camera for anywhere from 5 to 55 minutes. And then guys are supposed to have a discussion based on what was preached to the camera. You see this on Right Now Media.
That's the model.
You see it on 33, all these men's curricula. It's Bible teacher speaks to camera. Okay? Nothing wrong with that, except that wasn't what Jesus did. In Matthew chapter 13, it says this: Jesus only spoke to the crowds in parables. He did not say anything to them without using a parable. And so I'm doing a series called Man Time with Live Up Resources here in Pennsylvania. And what we do is we create a series of very short parable-style videos, less than a minute long. Picture this. The guys come in, they're all sitting at tables. And then you play this 45-second long video that's just a parable, a modern day parable. It's not a parable of Jesus. And then each of the tables, the guys talk about it, they discuss it, they argue, they do what guys do. And then you call on each table captain, what does Alpha Team think it means? Well, we think it means this. Bravo Team, what do you think it means? Well, they think it means this. Charlie Team, what do you think? And each team, they're competing to see who can get closest to the actual meaning of the parable. Jesus did this with his disciples. He preached a parable, and then his disciples talked about it, and then they came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. Remember that? He didn't tell them right away what they meant. They talked about it among themselves, undoubtedly. So then, back to modern day. So you got your tables, they've all got their theories, and then you play a brief interpretation video, again, less than a minute long, that explains what the parable actually means. And then they have their discussion. And so we're calling the series at Mantime. If you want to learn more about it, it's at mantime.men. But you can use these parables. And the cool thing about them is we've done our test groups in, and I had a couple of guys say the greatest things. One of them said to me, thank you, David. I've been in church 40 years. I've never had to think for myself because there's always been a guy up front telling me what I'm supposed to think.
Right.
And I loved it. The other cool thing we found is that at the end of the meeting, the guys can take out their phones and shoot a QR code that pops up on the screen, and the parable pops up on their phones. And they immediately start sharing the parable to their social media. Not the interpretation, just the parable. And so what guys were doing is they say, what's the bigger meaning behind this little story? Ask me. Come on, take a guess. And their guy and gal friends were guessing what it means. And then they could have online individual conversations with those guys and say, no, why don't you come to Man Time with me? And they can invite them. Oh, sure, I'll try it. Because you're not inviting them to a Bible study. You're inviting them to figure out a mystery. It's like a mystery party. It's not religious. But then the discussions is where we bring the Bible in to surprise them. So I'm very excited about this. You know, there's 40 parables of Jesus in the gospel. There's one sermon. Why do we have 40 parables? Because men remembered them and they shared them with others. And this is the great deficit that we're hoping to solve with Man Time. When you go to a typical men's meeting, you go home with nothing to share. No way to share your faith online. With Man Time, you've got a parable that you understand, that you talked about with your brothers, that you're working on all week long, and you have a way of sharing it with others. And that's the hope, is that we build the evangelism right into Man Time.
I absolutely love this. I've gone to this website. I've looked at several. Watched a bunch of these parables. They're all phenomenal. I think this is gonna really be a powerful tool that men are gonna love across the country. And I also love the fact that it does what Jesus did, in that it puts men on the spot for a minute. Like, hey, this is not just you as an audience member. I'd like for you to think for a second and respond. And this is a huge part of. We'll give a little spoiler here. Our class that a guy goes through to earn his Men's Alliance patch is called Carry the Fire. And we put men on the spot big time. It's like, you are not going to be an audience member. We're going to ask you a question in front of 10 or 12 other men, and we're going to sit here and wait for you to answer it. And then when you answer it as best you can, we're going to poke holes in your answer as best we can and make you defend that answer. And I've had men come up to me at the end of this course and say, holy smokes, it was that fear of you putting me on the spot every week that made me get into the Bible, that made me study, that made me know what I was talking about, and not just shoot from the hip, but be able to reply with, well, here's what Jesus said, and give chapter and verse. Okay, now I can't poke holes in that anymore. But that man would have never gotten to that place if he was an audience member. It took a little bit of putting people on the spot. You don't have to do it in a mean way, but just a little bit of, hey, that tiny bit of pressure of calling on a guy in front of a group with a really hard question, and then not letting him just get away for free if he gives a bad answer.
Yeah.
And this is the model that I believe changes men's lives, because they learn it for themselves. They don't just get fed it, they go learn it. And when a man goes and learns something on his own, he's passionate about it, he's on fire for it, and he'll go home and he'll teach it to his kids.
Yeah. Okay. Let me put that into one phrase for you, and you're going to carry this one around for a long time. Ready?
All right.
Discovered truth always beats delivered truth.
There it is.
I'm going to say it again.
That's why you're the author.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Discovered truth always beats delivered truth. And Man Time is a truth discovery process. You know, again, I'm not trying to trash the rest of the men's ministry curriculum, but what is the discovery process? Man of God appears on video. Man of God lectures from the stage. He tells us all these things. There is no discovery. There's no having to dig. There's no moment of, I got to get out of the boat and get onto the waves. You know, It's here it is, stay in the boat. And I think that's another way we injure men, is we make it too easy for them to understand. The other part of where it says Jesus only taught the crowds in parables, the next verse said, the reason he did it is so that hearing they would not understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't want them to understand.
He put it on the top shelf.
Yeah, he
He didn't
did.
he didn't dumb it down and put it on the bottom shelf for everybody to reach. He was like, I want to see who's actually motivated to come get this.
Right. And then those who came and asked his disciples later on, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. Then he explained it to them. And that's the other component. You make the guy sweat for a while, but then you give him the answer. And then that undoubtedly must have started great conversations among the men. So we're trying to replicate this teaching process, this four-step teaching process Jesus put his men through, and we're going to see how it works with men in the local church. And I've heard a rumor that David Goose Mills may be one of our presenters in Man Time.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if I can deliver a parable. It sounds like
Well,
a fun
yeah,
challenge.
we need to. I
Challenge.
mean, no pressure. The last two guys who tried, we killed them. No, just kidding. Just kidding. But
Hey,
if we
you're
can,
making me want to go for it. I like see
if
you're
we, if we can get you up to the studio in Pennsylvania, we might just have a parable for you. We'll see.
I'll crawl up there if I need to.
There it is.
I'd
That's the
be honored,
spirit.
be absolutely honored to be a part of that. And I'll just point this out to the listener because this is just kind of hitting me listening to you as well. Um, you're not just listening to a guy who writes a book about what's wrong with the church. You're listening to a guy who is seeing the problem and giving his entire life to fixing it, right? And changing an entire culture in this country. So, David, I really appreciate all you're doing. The church you're starting, the parables you're building, and just all this body of work that you've done for men in this country. I've been always wanting to ask you this question since I first read Why Men. What did your pastor think of the title of your book? How did that go over when you tell your pastor the name of the book you're writing?
This has been one of the most surprising things. Uh, the male pastors have been very intimidated by this title and by this book. And I've gotten relatively few speaking engagements from them. And I think, by the time it came out in 2005, the church was already in a period of pretty steep decline. And they are trying to preserve their church, to grow their church. And so when a title comes in that's so inflammatory, like why men hate going to church, I think a lot of pastors immediately go into defensive mode. They think something about it. They think I'm going to come in there and try to. That is not my heart. I know pastors are working so hard. My son's a pastor,
Hmm.
and they are working so hard. They've got employees who are depending on them. They've got people who are depending on them to keep the church going, to keep the doors open. They see so much potential in their communities. And the thing that pastors need to understand about me is I'm not a destroyer, I'm a tweaker. I'm not going in like Elon Musk with my chainsaw. There are adjustments that we can make in the local church, small things that can really make the church more welcoming and more challenging to men. And here's the other thing. When men come into your church, women follow. I think a lot of pastors are afraid that if we make the church more man-friendly, women are going to get all upset. And this has been the witness time after time. When you create a church, when you have a church full of godly men who are following hard after Jesus, you can't keep the women away
That's
because
right.
there's nothing more attractive to a godly woman than a godly man. And I'm not even speaking of, romantically or whatever.
Right.
Even married women are attracted to being in the presence of godly men. They want to worship among godly men. I'm not talking about any sort of sexual thing. I'm just saying that it is attractive to a woman. A woman feels safe and protected when she is surrounded by men who truly love the Lord and are following the Lord. And that's kind of been the focus of our ministry all the time, all along, is not to go in and wreck the church or destroy it, but to build it up and help pastors and help church leaders become more welcoming to men and boys, because that's the future of the church. And the stats prove this time and time again. When a church has a core of godly involved men, it grows. They're like Miracle Grow. But when the men withdraw, the church declines. And so that's, if you want to get in touch with me, davidmurrow.com, I'd be glad to help you get more men in your church.
Man, that's so awesome. It takes a lot of courage to write a book with that title. It takes a lot of courage to write a book. I can only imagine that you must have had a lot of spears thrown at
Yeah.
you. I've never done anything with that abrasive or whatever of a title,
Confrontational, let's say.
confrontational of a title, and I've gotten so many spears thrown for every little tiny thing that I say that gets taken the wrong way. I can only imagine what happens when you come right out and write a book called Why Men Hate Going to Church. But the way I'm viewing this is that takes tremendous courage, because it takes a lot of courage to be the first person to start sounding the alarm when everybody thinks they're doing fine. Imagine, trying to alert everyone on the Titanic that the ship is sinking. People are going to say, "Oh, you just hate this ship, or you're just trying to bash on its builders or whatever." You're like, "No, I'm here to save you guys, because I see a problem that apparently nobody else is seeing right now. And I want to let you guys know so that we can fix this, so that we can save as many people as possible, so that we can do whatever is necessary to prevent this great loss that I can see is taking place." And nobody wants to be that person. It takes a very strong person in a culture to be like, you know what, I'll take the spears, but I can't sit quietly on this sideline anymore, seeing what I'm seeing. And we're all a part of it, whether we write a book or run a podcast, or we just sit quietly in church every single Sunday and keep our mouth shut. You're still just as much a part of it as you or I. It's just you're choosing a different role to play. So I think that's an important thing for people to realize is it's not about hating on the ship. It's about trying to save it. And and again, I can only imagine the spears you've had thrown,
Well,
and you're still here smiling.
here's a little scar right here, and
Yeah.
um, no, it's been an honor to kind of lead this movement, and I hope that it has been an encouragement to the local church. I've heard back from so many pastors, so many people like you who have read the book, made the little changes, and seen more men more involved. And I hope the idea with a league isn't intimidating. I'm not trying to undermine the existing church, but every 500 years, the church needs a refresh. And I think it's time to get very serious about daily personal coaching, what was known as disciple making.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to take some of the energy, time, attention, and money that goes into the Sunday show and redirect it into coaching, into community, because that's what people desperately want, need, and can't find anywhere else. And that was the hallmark of Jesus's ministry. There were plenty of Bible teachers in his day. They were everywhere. The teachers of the law, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. Everybody was teaching the Bible. But what was the difference with Jesus? Jesus gave them what they wanted, and could not find, desperately wanted and couldn't find anywhere else. And I think that's what we've got to do. We've got to look at the culture today and say, what is it? How can we deliver Jesus in a way that they want, need, and cannot find anywhere else? And unfortunately, the way we do church right now is we're in this period called the Great Dechurching. We've got to rethink what we deliver. And a great Sunday stage show for 50 years, put on the best show and your church will grow. That model doesn't work anymore, because what people want is community and coaching, and we got to make it easy for them to access that.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, men want to be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
We need community, we need coaching, and we want to be challenged.
There it
We
is.
we don't want it made too easy for us. If it's too easy, it's boring. Make it hard, make it challenging. And one of the most unpopular podcasts I think I've ever recorded was one where I was pointing out the fact that that the word relationship is nowhere in the Bible.
Hmm.
And Jesus never says, and this, you have to be careful how you say this because people want to read all into this and try to take it the wrong way. But Jesus never says he wants to have a relationship with you. What Jesus said time and time again to every man was, follow me. He
Right.
said, take up your cross and follow me. He said, put down your fishing nets and follow me. It was
Hmm.
all about leadership and action. He's going to be the leader and you're going to take action. And he promised them difficulty along the way. Now, do I believe that Jesus wants a relationship with us? Absolutely. I'm
Hmm.
not saying he doesn't. I'm saying he chose not to use those words. Those are soft words, and he chose to use hard words. Again, feminine message versus masculine message. He preached to men. He gave a very tough message to men of follow me. And churches today are given a very soft feminine message of Jesus wants a relationship with you. While that is true, it's not appealing to men, and it's not the message that Jesus gave. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that
Yeah. Let me, can I, you stole that from me.
please
So let me keep
go.
going. Um, yeah, I've got a whole chapter on that, how we use
Yeah,
that term personal relationship with Jesus.
yeah.
It never appears in scripture.
I had to when I read you. By the way, when I read that in the book, I I was so shocked. I was like, I don't uh, what, and I grabbed my Strong's Concordance off the bookshelf and I checked for myself. And you go to the letter R, and you're like, I'll be doggone. This guy was
Yeah.
right. That word ain't in the Bible.
Well, and the thing is, if you think about the movies that men like to watch, it's all about mission, right? Mission Impossible, or a hero saves the world against impossible odds. It's the
Mhm.
same movie over and over again. When women choose a movie, it's all about a relationship. It's about a woman who lives in a beautiful loft apartment in New York and falls in love with a guy, and they fall in the water, and they eventually come together and they kiss, and that's the end of the movie. The point of the movie with men is to accomplish a mission. It's what? With women, the movie is about who. It's about finding a personal relationship with a man who's deeply in love with you. And in the last 100 years, the number one way we describe discipleship is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Even though that
Mm.
term never appears in the Bible, it's become the chief metaphor we use. So what we're doing is we're selling the gospel, we're explaining the gospel in terms that every woman instinctively understands, but in terms of men have no use for, because we're all about mission. We're all about achieving, accomplishing something. So when Jesus walked down the Sea of Galilee, you remember he turned to his disciples and he said, "Come, have a personal relationship with me." No, he said, "Come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." So what is
Mhm.
he saying? Follow me, and here's what we're going to achieve. Here's the what. And I think this metaphor, personal relationship with Jesus, I think it's probably turned more men off than we realize. It's not in the Bible, and it is not helpful.
Man, David, thank you so much for being on our podcast. This has been an absolute honor, and we'll have to have you on again. I can't wait for your parables to come out,
Mhm.
and also for the sequel, Why Men Love Going to Church,
Mhm.
which is going to be absolutely awesome as well, because there's plenty of reasons for that as well.
Hmm. Well, thank you. It's been a good time with you, and maybe we'll see you here in the studio in Pennsylvania. What do you think?
I'm hoping. I'm on my way, man.
All right, well, cut this off and we'll do the audition. How's that?
All right, sounds good. To find out more about what we're doing and to join us on our mission, go to men'salliancetribe.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review.